It's not doing it.
Well, we're on.
Okay.
Hopefully the TV is working. So, good evening and welcome to the Lake Bluff School District 65 Board of Education budget hearing for September 18th, 2018. Julie, could you please take the roll?
Certainly. Mark Berry.
Present.
Philip Hood.
Present.
Julie Gottschall, present. Leanne Charlo.
Present.
Richard Haig.
Present.
John Morozen.
Present.
Susan Ryder.
Present.
All right, so we have a quorum and we can begin. And the purpose of this meeting is to allow the public to comment on the proposed 2017-2018 school budget. People desiring to speak will be recognized by the president. They can state their name, their address, and then make their comment. And written comments can be submitted to the president as well. So first thing I do is I'm going to ask for comments by the administration on this year's budget. If anybody would like to say anything. Mr. Khan?
Jay's going to go, he will actually go through just a brief summary.
Okay. Why don't you do that
So-
first?
That way it completes the budget cycle and it all goes on record. Very brief summary.
I'll go quickly.
Just so everybody knows, we've seen this 3 times already?
14 times.
No, this is the fifth. This is the fifth.
Yep.
So it's not, this is not sudden.
We got the 15 minutes set aside, so.
So we passed the tentative budget in August, and we brought it back to the board. It's been on display for public viewing and for 30 days in the district office and on our website. And we're passing our final budget in September, and it's due to the county by October 1st. There's an operating surplus in this year's budget, and we also have a planned total deficit. As we transfer funds to capital projects for air conditioner replacement. So this was a planned deficit, and we had a surplus in the previous year's budget, and we will have a planned deficit in this year's budget.
That sounds a little bit like the Woodstock audio.
Yeah.
You ever seen that movie?
That's it.
Better? I don't- So just briefly, you can see historically our fund balance was roughly 100% of our operating expenditures. And then we did a tax restructuring and brought that down to about 60%. And then we funded half of the middle school renovation with reserves. And so our fund balance dropped to about 40% of operating expenditures where we wanted it to be, where it remains today. And if you look down at the bottom, if you look at the last 2 years, our fund balance is flat because we had a surplus last year as we delayed our air conditioning project. It was budgeted partially in last year's budget, and we've pushed it into this year. So we had a surplus last year and a planned deficit this year. So if you look at both years in conjunction with each other, our fund balance is remaining flat. We're maintaining it. The revenue assumptions, our 2017 tax levy, our operating funds were up 2.16%. 2.1% of that is from existing property, and then our debt service increased by 1.2%. We're getting, now that the state has passed the evidence-based funding law, we're getting 100% of our general state aid, which is, it's not being prorated like it was in the past. We are seeing some decrease in state revenue because they're still behind in payments, mostly on categorical payments like reimbursements for transportation. We went to 100% full-day kindergarten this year and are no longer charging revenue, so our local funds are decreased a little bit. And then we did offset some of that with a transportation fee, which was implemented this year. If you look at revenue, we had previously reduced our education levy and increased it in transportation and IMRF. And so now that we've gone back to our historical levels, our transportation IMRF levies are back up and our education levy is lower. And our O&M levy is up as well because we put more, or our O&M revenue is up as we put all our state aid money there in order to transfer it to pay for the air conditioning units. So in general, our total operating revenue is flat, and it's just being shifted back and forth between funds. Our revenue breaks down 91% property taxes, 5% other local, which is mostly student fees, 3% state revenue, and 1% federal revenue, and this is pretty consistent from year to year. Looking at our expenditures, the average teacher salary increase was 3%. Average classified staff increase of 3.25% and admin increase of 2.85%. We added some certified staff, half an FTE for our pre-kindergarten section. We had one retirement, and then we added some aides, custodial staff, and cafeteria staff, as we discussed at the last meeting. We did see a large increase in our insurance premiums this year of 7.7%. Historically, it's been closer to 3 or 4%, and that's mostly due to our experience. And then we're starting to see some of the TRS expenses shifted to the district. Slowly, the first wave of this is any salaries in excess of the governor's salary, the district picks up the normal cost of the pension. So it's a very small amount, not that significant, but I expect in the future that this will be a bigger part of the budget. We're going to continue our additional night custodian with GCA, and we've also seen very favorable special ed spending in the last couple of years because we've put in a lot of supports to keep kids in the least restrictive environment in our district. And I've added just some spending in this area because I think there's a risk that we could see increased spending in the future. And it's also very hard to predict.
I did want to clarify, Jay, in the addition of .4 FTE, that whole line, it was really decided between our last meeting and the meeting in July when we added the preschool.
Right.
So it was over 2 meetings. That wasn't all discussed last week.
Okay.
So,
We, as everyone knows, we replaced the air conditioning at the elementary school over the summer. That hit this year's budget. We've redesigned the LBES office for security reasons and doing some miscellaneous improvements at the middle school to finish up the renovation project. We purchased new Chromebooks for grades 2, 5, and 6 and this year, and our 8th grade MacBooks are coming off the lease. We also replaced all the projectors in the middle school that we did not do during the renovation, so we finished up that as well. And then there's a reduction in transportation spending in the budget. I've added a little bit of that back since you saw this last because we've had to add some routes back for various reasons. So if you look at expenditures, our total expenditures by fund, the education fund is up 5%, the operations and maintenance fund is up 15%. The education fund is up primarily due to salaries and benefits. Our salary increases, plus our large insurance increase, and then with a few additional FTE. The operations maintenance spending is largely due to the fact that we had budgeted the air conditioning in the budget last year and didn't spend it. So the comparison year over year shows a bigger spend this year. And then transportation is budgeted to decrease. We still do have some route reductions, and we should see a decrease. It may not be quite the 50,000 that's projected. And then down at the bottom, capital projects is increasing by $1 million, and that's the air conditioning project. If you look at it by object, again, the salaries pretty much in line with the increases and the small increase in FTE. Benefits are proportional to salaries for the most part, and then the ones that are not, the health insurance was a 7% increase, so that gets you to about 10. And then everything else is fairly flat. Capital is a very small number, so because this is just the operating capital, not our capital projects fund. And then dues and fees is mostly due to the special ed budget increase. We added one outplacement. Our expenditures, 2/3 of our total expenditures are salary and benefits. If you pulled out capital and debt service, it'd be more like 3/4 of our expenditures. This stays fairly consistent from year to year as well. Purchase services and supplies make up another 15 or 16%, and then debt services is 11% of our budget. If you look at our debt service over time, it's fairly stable up until 2029, and then there's a big drop off as we pay off the debt for the elementary school. And the only thing that's remaining is the small amount of debt that we took on for the middle school. And so as we plan our capital budget out, we'll keep in mind what our debt service schedule looks like so that we can spread out our costs and accordingly. And then looking at fund balance, as I said, our target is between 30 and 50%, and we're planning to end the year at 40%, which is right in the middle of that target. We have about an $800,000 deficit, but we had about the same amount in surplus in the previous year, so our net fund balance is unchanged. And that's all I had.
Any other comments or questions from administrators?
Jay, once again, good job with that. I know that some things changed over the summer, and I appreciate all the work that you did with all the other administrators, getting this all to pan out.
How about from the board? Anybody have a question or comment? Concern? From the audience? From the public? Not hearing any. Thank you for attending putting that together and for attending our budget hearing. And may I have a motion to adjourn this meeting at 6:58 PM?
So moved.
Second? I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're adjourned. We have to wait a minute for our next meeting.
You might
At ease.
Because we have new teachers here, I would just tell you, when we pass a budget, we need to have a budget hearing. So that runs from 6:45 to 7, and we cannot start the regular meeting until 7 o'clock. So we'll just have to sit and wait for a couple minutes until it's 7 o'clock.
It's only once a year, though.
I don't know. I was supposed to go, but I had curriculum night, and I think there were a lot of people out. Because usually I
Okay, we're back. Thank you for coming, and welcome to the Lake Bluff School District 65 Board of Education regular meeting for September 18th, 2018. Julie, could you take the roll again, please?
Sure. Mark Berry.
Present.
Philip Hood.
Present.
Julie Gottschall, present. Leanne Charlo.
Present.
Richard Haig.
Here.
John Rosen.
Present.
Susan Ryder.
Present.
Still present. Everybody's here. Great. All right, so we're going to begin our meeting. We already had our budget hearing, and we're going to start with the pledge. So if you guys could stand and join me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now's the time where we open the podium up for public comments. If anybody in the audience would like to address the board, please do so now. Not seeing anybody, I'll move on. We'll have the opportunity to do this at the end as well. I'll offer the opportunity for the board members to request an additional discussion item tonight or to add an agenda item for a future meeting. Anybody would like to raise something, please do so, or feel free to email myself or Jean.
Tonight, we are hearing on the teacher shortage. Susan, on my to-do list is still the evidence-based funding, which you'll be hearing about in October. And I don't have anything else on my list. If I do, please remind me.
Okay. And then I think we're going to introduce some new teachers. If Nate Blackmer and Margaret St. Clair would do that for us, that'd be great.
Start with elementary staff.
Do I take a picture of them too? Tracy and I are really excited to introduce our new staff from Lake Bluff Elementary School. They've already been a great addition to our family at Lake Bluff Elementary School. They've made really good connections with our students and with their colleagues, so they've been hard at work already. So we have Megan Kelly. She is teaching first grade for us this year. We have Robin O'Connor, who is teaching drama part-time, so she's there 2 days a week. We have Andrea Valkanis, who's teaching third grade for us this year. And Danielle Cray is our 0.5 3-year-old pre-K teacher who had a long-standing family commitment tonight, so she's not with us. So we just are really thrilled that they're here, and I know you're going to hear great things about them. Everybody can smile for Kelly over there.
Welcome, thank you for
Also, we're
joining
going to
us.
dismiss them to go home because they've had a really
Oh,
long
I
day.
thought you were going to tell them they had to stay here all night during our
I
meeting.
did say we were expecting an interpretive dance, but
Oh,
we'll save
okay.
that for next time.
Thank you, and
Initiation is
welcome.
over.
All right, good evening. We have 2 new teachers at Lake Bluff Middle School, and I knew one of them would be cutting it very close because she's also coaching volleyball this evening. She let me know 8 minutes ago that she was 4 minutes ago that she was 8 minutes away, so I'm dragging it out just a little to see if she walks in. I'll start, though, by introducing our part-time speech and language teacher. This is Ann Kohlmeyer-Dahlin. I know that some of the students also call her Mrs. KD, if they can't remember the hyphen, but we're thrilled to have her. She's been around the North Shore for some time, working with NSSED, and has had a lot of experience with a lot of different North Shore schools. So we're very lucky to have Ann with us. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like Alyssa's going to quite make it. So Alyssa Arwady is our new PE teacher. We had the opportunity to get to know her last year. She filled in for a long-term maternity leave in 6th grade science. So she's returned in that PE capacity and has taken on, coaching volleyball as well. So you may see her in a minute. If so, feel free to wave when she walks in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome.
So you may want to just tell them thanks, the teachers, and they can
Yeah,
go.
thanks, guys. I guess we'll see you next time, and take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I don't see a PTO representative. I don't see an Alliance representative. Jay's already
Yep,
done everything for the night.
it is Kevin.
Kevin is going to update us on enrollment, correct?
So, one of my responsibilities to you is to report to you about our enrollment, and so we officially report our enrollment to the state at various different points during the year. On the 6th day, at the end of September, and so the 6th day enrollment report goes to the county. The end of September is actually used for all of our budgeting and all of that other sort of thing that you'll hear at the next meeting. And then the third one is actually in March, which is the second part of the budgeting. But our enrollment is relatively stable. It decreased by about 1% since last year. It's still up about 5% since 2013. And so everything is listed very specifically in your board packets in terms of class sizes as of the 6th day. And if you can believe it, that was August 28th. And class sizes have already changed since then. We've had people move in and move out of the district since then. So.
Anybody have any questions? Thanks, Kevin. The next report that we have is my own, and I've talked about this a couple times over the past couple months. Just reminding, I'm going to do a reminder and then have a request of the board, reminding the community that we have elections coming up in April of 2019 for school board as well as the village and the park district. There are 3 board positions coming available. My term, Leanne's term, and Susan's term are all winding down and will be finished in April. And on November 1st of this year, we will be co-hosting a meeting with Vote Lake Bluff to answer questions for potential board candidates in the community who might be interested in running. And along with board members, administrators, and a representative from the IASB will be there to give them more formal declaration of what being a board member is all about. The request is that if there's anybody on the board who would like to attend with us to give that perspective, please let me know. Doesn't have to be right this second, but
I do need to know about a week ahead of time, because if we have over 2, I do need to post it.
yeah, it then becomes a board meeting, which is fine. But
That's more than fine.
hopefully we'll get some people who can attend. We've starting to hear some rumors about people showing interest in running, so. And then just to follow up with the community, just some more dates. So that November 1st meeting is not an obligation. It doesn't commit anybody to anything. It's just informational to help you learn a little bit about the job. Then on November 26th, if you are interested, and if you're interested in running through the town caucus, Vote Lake Bluff, that's when their application is due, on November 26th. And then the town caucus, Vote Lake Bluff, has their town meeting on December 5th, where you can get your signatures and your packets filled out with them. And then the actual packets and petitions are due between December 10th and the 17th, so whether it's on your own or through the town caucus. Anybody interested in doing any of that can reach out to myself, or if you have questions, anybody on the board can give you their point of view on what it's like to be on the board, so.
We also have all this information posted on our website, on the front page, because is it the county clerk, Shelley?
Yes.
Which, all the information on them is also available on our website.
And that's my report. Unless anybody has questions. Jean, did you have anything?
I just had a really short thing. My new challenge this year is I'm documenting one new thing I learned every day. So I want to share my new thing that I learned today. Margaret and Nate and Kevin and I attended a meeting out at West Leiden. It was the Chinese Delegation of Educators. There were about 45 of them, and all really cool presentations. But what I learned, which I did not know, is that in China, they do not allow Google. And the reason for that is that they are not allowed to Google answers for questions like that. So one of the main technology tools we all use is the Google Suite, especially in our classrooms, and this was kind of foreign to them because they're not allowed to use it. So I just thought, wow, we do live in a great country where we have lots of freedoms. I thought that was very interesting. So I'll write that in my diary for tonight. That's it.
Okay. And then we move on to the discussion part of our agenda, and we're going to begin with some folks from White Architects. Going to go over our facilities report. Welcome to Craig. Long time no see, guys. How are you?
Yeah, that it's controlled.
Oh, thanks. Dr. Sophie, ladies and gentlemen of the board, thanks for having us back again. It's nice to be here. Today we've been asked to talk a little bit about a report that we recently finished for the district. Began talking and thinking about it towards the tail end of the renovation project of the middle school, and it gained a little bit more steam last couple months. In light of some of the recent maintenance issues that you've had at the school. So we kind of jumped onto that. Our report today is going to be very brief.
Craig, can we just interrupt you for 10 seconds?
Yes.
And introduce our new teacher so that she can go home?
With a Cub shirt on, too. All right.
No.
I'm coming by.
Sorry.
Wow, she gets the trophy for brevity, huh? That's awesome. So our report is going to be very brief today. Open it up to whatever questions that you might have. I know you had a chance to get a hard copy of the report, so hopefully it's compelling reading. So if you do have any questions, well, we'll be happy to answer those for you. Generally speaking, when I come here, I'm the one talking, but what I'd like to do at this point is introduce Stephanie Sharkey. Some of you may have remembered her from when we did the middle school project. She was really the primary designer on that project. Kind of moved her over, and she did the recent renovation over at the elementary school, completed that. Stickler for detail. It was a perfect project for past two projects, very perfect for her sort of mindset and her skill set, and she transferred all those great qualities to putting this report together. So I want to turn it over to her because she did all the heavy lifting on this. So, Steph?
And Stephanie did a great job on the middle school, still getting compliments to this day about that building. So.
Thank you. That's very wonderful to hear. Thank you for having me. So to begin, for the facility assessment report, a visual survey was conducted of each of the buildings to assess the existing building systems and components. The district requested that we concentrate this study on those items that were bigger ticket items and not quite as visually obvious as the interior of the buildings and things. And so we focused our studies into three specific categories. Those are the site, the building envelope, and the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection systems. So for each one of these categories, a physical condition summary worksheet was completed, and you'll see an image of it there. And basically, it's a spreadsheet that identifies key different elements about each component of the building. The general information, which is a brief description or a manufacturer or materials or something to kind of describe what it is that we're looking at. The approximate quantities and areas or square footages of each of those different items, and the useful life remaining in years. So after kind of identifying what those main areas to address are, we took a look at each one of them and rated it in terms of its condition. The rating system was a system of 1 through 4. 1 for poor, 2 is fair, 3 was good, and 4 is kind of the best condition and really only requires typical routine maintenance. So once we identified those items that needed to be addressed within the next 0 to 15 years, we attached a conceptual budget price for each of those items. We worked with our White in-house estimators in White Construction in order to develop those numbers so that they could be as reliable as possible. And they also worked with us to include a factor for contingencies for soft costs, which include contingencies, any sort of professional fees if you went with a construction manager, or architectural design fees, insurance, bonds, things like that. So all of the numbers that you see in those spreadsheets actually are their soft costs that have those factors built in. What is not included in those costs is any escalation. They're considered $2018, so any prices for escalation down the road would have to be factored in a percentage for that. So what did we find? Overall, the buildings are really in very good condition. The report has a lot of different recommendations for things that we think the district might want to consider doing moving forward. However, please keep in mind that those are just that. They're recommendations. And in our mind, it's always good to be aware of everything and be cognizant and vigilant on the maintenance of buildings and kind of stay one step ahead. But there are certainly things that are identified in the report that might be able to go on a little bit longer with good maintenance. It goes a long way. So there's definitely things that might last a little longer than what the report shows. So overall, the district can expect to spend about $3 million or so in maintenance costs in those three categories I identified over the next 15 years. And we kind of took a look at those totals in two different ways. You'll see those two graphs on the screen. The first one is budgeting by timeline. So within the next 5 to 10 years or so is the vast majority of the expenditures that you can look at. Most of the conditions are not immediate emergencies, but they're also not things that are going to last past 15 years or so. The other chart shows the pie graph of the budget by work category. And so we kind of took a look at it, those three different categories and how the funds will be allocated toward those areas. And coincidentally, it actually ended up being that they're all about the same. Each area is allocated more or less equally across those three different facets that we looked at. Now, these are district-wide totals. The report goes into more detail about how those totals break down per school, but it's kind of interesting to note that the majority of the funds, about 2.5 times, would be spent at the middle school versus the elementary school, which, when you look at the age of the buildings, makes sense. We understand that there's some specific items that are of particular interest to you I wanted to address today. The first one is the elementary school playgrounds. So one thing that we noticed at the elementary school is that the playgrounds are not currently wheelchair accessible. So there's a couple different options for the board moving forward. At minimum, the first one is to provide access ramps. There's a couple ways to do this. It would be adding a concrete ramp from the sidewalk into the play area, or you could depress the curb. So that way there's an area for a wheelchair to be able to wheel into the play area. However, in order to provide the greatest inclusivity for all students, we were asked to also put in the considerations for the poured-in-place rubber surface. And what this does is it allows a person in a wheelchair not just to get into the playground area, but actually to utilize all of the equipment. This is the ideal solution. So this is something that doesn't have to be done all entirety. Jay had actually gone through a study with New Toys at looking at different options of certain areas that could be done if the entire playground wasn't. So there's certainly a way of decreasing the expense of that, should the board decide to do that. The other item that we took a look at was the boilers in the middle school. And the boilers really, they're showing signs of wear and tear. However, they're not an emergency in our opinion as we're looking at them. We were guessing that we've got about 5 years or so before we need to look at the boiler replacement in the middle school. Now, that being said, there are 4 different pumps that support the boiler, 2 of which are in good condition and don't need any imminent work. However, the other 2, one of them is not functioning properly at all. The other one is definitely past its useful life. So we would recommend replacement of those in the next 2 years, which, based on Jay's budget analysis, potentially might have been done recently since we actually did those surveys. So
It's in
well
the
done
budget.
there.
It's in the
Okay.
budget, and we're doing that this year. so.
Okay. One of the things, though, that we identified in the mechanical systems is actually the air handler units, in our mind, was something that they looked like to be the original units from the 1986 gymnasium edition. They're located in the gymnasium mezzanine. Those actually, we recommend putting priority to over the boiler replacements themselves. The other element that we took a look at is the roofing at the middle school. And all in all, the roofs are actually in really very good shape. We're not entirely sure of the age of both of the systems. However, we're guessing that those roofs can last about another 5 to 10 years or so before replacement is recommended. At that time, you've got a couple different options for replacement. The 1954 and 59 editions have a single-ply membrane roof, which is consistent to what all the other roofs are in the district. However, the 1986 gymnasium edition has a ballasted built-up roof. So at that time, you guys could decide whether or not to pursue replacing that roof in kind or going with a single-ply system. There's certainly pros and cons to each, and there's definitely a cost difference, and we actually stated that in the report itself within the spreadsheet. We priced it in the spreadsheet for the single-ply roof, but in the comment section, there's a price showing what it would be for ballasted, or vice versa. I'm not sure which was where, but so that's some choices. But really, for the roofs, there's a lot that you can do with patching and with maintenance that can kind of push you a little bit further through the years that might be able to last a little bit longer for those roof systems. Some additional considerations I wanted to bring up based on our studies that I wanted to bring to your attention were the structural frame and slab is, in our mind, something that really takes some high priority this is at the boiler room, lower level boiler room entrance at the stairs that go down to the boiler room. The slab over that now goes into the STEM lab has shown some serious steel corrosion and concrete spalling, and I know it's been patched many times over the year. This is something that, in our mind, is worth being addressed within the next 2 years or so, to replace that portion of the sidewalk entirely. The railings in that area seem like they're in good shape. and could be reinstalled in the new concrete sidewalk and slab. Another item to take a look at is the gymnasium addition again. That 1986 edition keeps coming back, but take a look at that and do some masonry tuck pointing. That building, of all of the masonry walls, there's some areas that are identified in the report at the 1954 and 59 buildings that need to be addressed. The mortar is starting to degrade. However, the 86 building is really the worst of it all. So that's something that within the next 2 years, we recommend washing it, cleaning with an acid cleaner, and then within about 5 years or so, raking out and repointing a lot of those joints. About 85% or so of those walls we recommend to be remortared. And then finally, the main entrances at the district office entrance as well as the main entrance of the school are still the existing, the original wood framed storefronts. So those are something that we would recommend within the next about 2 to 5 years or so to replace with a insulated aluminum system. And one item not on there is the parking lot of the west parking lot was not something we were able to include in the 2016 renovations. So that's something within about 3 to 5 years or so I wanted to bring to your attention to start thinking about replacement of that parking lot in full. It's starting to show some alligator cracking and things like that is not ideal for that surface. In addition to the facility assessment, we were also asked to do an overall color study at the elementary school. And this was done really to kind of better reflect some of the aesthetics and decisions that were made at the middle school and to have greater district uniformity between the two schools. So knowing that the existing flooring at the elementary school would remain intact, we studied that building and came up with a recommended paint palette for painting of the walls to kind of bring a cohesive finish palette together. So the idea of this is that this is a painting plan that the district can use moving forward throughout, over time as they're doing maintenance projects in the district or any construction projects at the schools, and they can phase it in however funds and time and priorities allow.
Okay, next steps. Next steps are really up to you. The report was done with an eye towards the future. As Stephanie mentioned, nothing is of imminence that we have to take care of immediately. It's certainly at your discretion, but it is used as a tool as Mr. Khan goes about and prepares budgets and presents to you what your options are as far as taking care of your building. So even taking care of a little bit at a time saves having to do it all at once and expend quite a bit of dollars. But, buildings are living, breathing things. They need love and attention as well, so.
Going along with the paint palettes, was there any cost included for painting the building?
No, the cost for the painting, the interior finish study was not included in the report.
Because we're doing that on our own.
All the teachers are chipping in and. And the board.
Board members.
Board members volunteered, I heard.
We'll be there Saturday morning.
I will say, I'm going to say a couple things and then they may have some questions. Jay asked me to share with you that a couple things. Number one, from my vantage point, this has been asked for since before I got here. So the ability to plan is just very crucial, especially when you look ahead to fund balance. We have fund balance now. Do we save? We need to make some decisions with that. Part of a bigger picture, though, is a capital plan. And what happens with that is Jay is going to take this plan and add to it things like technology, phones. I think I updated you that our phones infrastructure may need to be changing. And there was one other thing, and I can't remember what it is. But the bottom line is that he's going to come up with a big capital plan to lead us into really the next 10 to 20 years. And you should have that very soon. Furniture. Because those of you that were around when the elementary school opened, a lot of the furniture was moved over from the old building. So we really need to get into a plan that every year we replace X amount of furniture.
Is there still e-school furniture in the elementary school?
Yes, quite a bit of it. And then you come up with questions and we'll have to make some decisions on this. You know, do you make a uniform, what's in a typical classroom, and make sure that every classroom is outfitted for that? Because that impacts a furniture plan also. So, that you'll be seeing more of that capital plan, but this is the crucial piece to it.
So
It's very comprehensive.
This is the same one that Jay will be using? This isn't
Jay will be
dumbed down
using
for us?
this, no, Jay will be using this and then encompassing it in this capital plan.
Can we make sure that this gets public on our board, on the
Yes.
website? Because there are several people in the community who ask me about this every time I see them.
We'll actually put it on the front page of our website for right now, because it's new.
It's a great.
The other thing, it was interesting, when Jay showed his slides earlier tonight, showing kind of the drop-off in long-term debt payment. I think a consideration is, what's your debt, what are you gonna be comfortable with in terms of debt capacity?
Right.
And I look at some of these expenses being in the 3 to 5 year range where there's a bulk of them. If we could push that more to the 5, and, there may be an opportunity to refinance debt.
Again,
Because I think that ends in 2028, so that's 10 years from now. So, something to think about.
Right.
As another alternative than doing a year to year, is if we could truly defer and get us, what?
Chances of interest rates going down even further in the next 10 years are pretty slim.
I know, but if it can hold, who knows what it's gonna do in the next 3 to 5 years, but if there were an opportunity in the next 3 to 5 years, it's something that we should be thinking about as a way to pay for this.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
No, nice job.
Yeah, thank you,
Well
guys.
done, clear, easy to understand.
Thank
Very
you.
nice. Easy to understand, thank you. Okay, so Dr. Rubenstein is now gonna do a presentation
you.
on MAP and STAR,
Good to see you.
testing growth trends.
You can take that. In a couple more months. Yep.
Wrecking the place.
Hi,
Good
thanks.
to see you.
Thank you, good job.
Thanks, good to see you.
Good to
Good
see
to
you,
see you.
Steph.
Yep. I forgot your name at first. No, not now, but when I introduced, sorry.
It's an almond. Thanks, good to see you. Nice overview, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
And the Three Musketeers out there, huh?
Kevin,
Great.
when you begin your presentation, you're gonna talk about your presentations in October and November also, right?
It's in there.
Okay, good.
You got it. Upcoming plans. You took it right out of my mouth. So tonight, we are actually going to go over Board Goal 1. And there are several parts of Board Goal 1. The updated strategic plan breaks it out into several different parts. As you'll recall, one of the challenges of measuring student achievement is that this board really likes to see comparables, and it's hard to do with the way that we measure things. And so we actually broke that out into specific things in the strategic plan. And so tonight, you're going to see the way that we measure things internally with respect to MAP, and MAP growth and MAP achievement in our different groups. In October, we're going to add to your plates the park and the science, all of this state assessment and proficiency information, and a little bit about how we're using that data. And then if all goes well, and the state cooperates with us, and life is good, then in November, at your board meeting in November, we're gonna bring it all together for you and talk about our ESSA indicators and our new school ratings and park growth, and really show you how each of our schools compares to the other schools. So this is typically the slide where I say to you, there are not comparisons. So there are no comparisons to other schools in here. Just putting that out there. 'Cause somebody always asks that question, how does this compare? And so there are no comparisons here. So these are the strategic plan indicators that we have in Board Goal 1, really the percentage of all students in the expected growth range. And we'll talk about that more in just a second. And that is different than the percentage of students achieving average or above, in the average or above average range. So that's the difference between growth and achievement. The percentage of students achieving at 90th percentile or above. One of the things that we really wanted to focus on were our students who were highly achieving, and really measuring that and what that looks like and tracking that over time. And so over the next couple of board presentations, you'll see how we do that. Percentage of students in the English learner subgroup achieving above the 50th percentile. Same thing for the students in the special education subgroup and the low income subgroup achieving above the 50th percentile. So about the NWEA MAP assessment, many of you guys are familiar with this. Just some vocabulary up there for you. It's grade independent and Common Core aligned assessments in the areas of reading comprehension and math. We administer them to all students. Last year, and the data that you'll see right now, it was all students in grades 2 through 8. This is the first year that we are doing it for all students K-8. So our kindergarten students used to take the STAR assessment, which was a little bit different and give us a little bit different data. This is the first year that our kindergarten and first grade students are taking the MAP assessment. So next year at this time, you'll see that same data for the kindergarten and first grade students. That's why there's a star next to it. And they take it 3 times a year. It's administered using the computerized system, and results are available almost instantly. And it's measured on an equal interval unit called the RIT point. It's an adaptive assessment, so your answer to the first question and the second question determines your, third question, and so on and so forth. The goal in the assessment itself is so that you get to a place where you're getting approximately 50% of the questions correct, and approximately 50% of the questions incorrect. And so it can be rather challenging and rather time-consuming for some of our students who have never had a super challenging assessment before like that. So it is pretty interesting there. And then how we use the MAP assessment. So we use it to make sure that our students are on track with our curriculum. We also use it as a measure of growth using a standardized measure. And we're required to do a universal screening of all students, obviously, 3 times per year, and so we use it for that. We are also, as you know, required by law to have a certain percentage of our evaluations are required to have growth scores included as a part of our evaluation. So 30% of my evaluation score overall is based on these MAP scores. And so that is a year behind. And so all of our staff scores for this coming school year are based on these scores from last year. And that was something that was decided by our para committee. Just the results. So the percentage of all students in the expected growth range. So really what MAP does is that based on a student's past performance is that it projects out where the student should be, and then it measures basically how close or how far away from that target you are. And so you can see up there the percentage of the students who met their expected growth target. And so it ranges actually, and this is just in the area of math. And I don't know why the screen is bouncing again, because I'm not. So the percentage, this is just for math, and so there is a range. One of the things that stood out to Kelly and I as we were starting to look at these sorts of things is that there was certainly a range between all of the grade levels. That's the first part. The second part is that It's like we're having an earthquake.
Don't
Go starting rumors now.
Right? I'm not doing anything. So the other piece of this is that while I did not put the demographics or background of students up here in some of these particular groups or classes, some of that really comes out in some of these test scores. So for example, the 4th grade class for last year is the class with the highest percentage of English learners, highest percentage of kids with disabilities, highest percentage of kids from a low-income background. It plays out, it is kind of a statistical anomaly even within our groupings here. Julie, I see you have a
But
question.
isn't that accounted for in the growth projection, that people are starting at perhaps a lower level because they're just learning English, and so their expected growth would be a lower percentage? So why?
Not as much in the MAP growth. It is accounted for, and this is why we use different measures for different things. It is accounted for in the ECRA growth model. It sort of equalizes some of the different things, but in the MAP growth model, it's blind to those sorts of things. So,
But it's individualized growth, right? So in terms of growth, wouldn't we hope and expect that everybody would be 80, 90, because it's an individualized growth pattern, so that's why we're striking is kind of low.
Correct. But what it's saying here is that as students are taking the assessment, and what I'm trying to say here is that as students are taking the assessment, is that many of the students in that class are significantly undershooting their growth targets, and that is likely because of the demographics in that class. And while it is individually sort of measured to the diverse group of learners in that class, it is not as sensitive as some of our other measures, like in ECRA or some of the other pieces there.
Could you say just something quick about, or simple about how the growth prediction is calculated?
Sure, I will try.
I don't mean to
yep.
put, a whole other presentation. but-
Yep, absolutely. So it is based on a national sample of all of the students who have taken, it's not just Lake Bluff students. It is based on a national sample of all the students in 4th grade who started at, a certain score of 232 and projected out where those students should be. So it does not necessarily predict that if you are a special education student, that you may grow at a slower rate because you have a disability, for example. It tries to project, but it's not always as accurate as we would like it to be.
So just to make sure that I understand it, it would take a look at a 4th grade student who had a score of, I'm going to make something up, 220
Yep.
on their previous test. They, on average, such a student might be expected to get a 230 the next time, or that's a
Yes.
lot, but
Yes.
say 235. But when that calculation is made, they're not distinguishing between any of the different factors that can,
Not at all.
poverty, income,
And they are not
language.
saying this kid is in Lake Bluff, and so they have a great curriculum and great curricular programs, or there's no way for us to say we're giving that student all of these interventions or what have you. It is just based on that.
What the
Is
prediction
it, if you
is.
have kids that are moving a lot, or have just moved, I think that's been shown to impact math a lot
Yes.
too, so.
Yes.
Okay.
So that sort of plays into some of that within the growth range here.
Thank you.
Julie, you,
Well, I mean, the examples you just gave, again, lead me to look at these numbers and sort of scratch my head a little bit, because I would think we could provide so much intervention and support and assistance that we would, again, be on the higher end of growth rather than, and we are if you use 50% as the measure, but
So 51% was our lowest, obviously. 90% was the highest. And I don't have comparables, but when you see the park growth, I have a feeling that you are going to be pretty surprised at how much we grew compared to our comparable neighbors.
Yeah, it's hard to look at this in isolation, as a number by itself. You don't know if 50 is a big number or a little number.
Right.
Do we do any year-over-year analysis of this?
Some, and these are about steady.
Yeah, I just always, whenever we're having a conversation about this kind of thing, I always go back to, my behavioral statistics classes in college. You
Right.
get such a small sample
Yes.
that if you have even 2 or 3 students in one class who are exceptionally talented, and then even 2 or 3 in the following class, it's going to make it look like you have a big change in your performance with a pretty small number.
That is correct. And so that actually plays out over time in some of the later examples that you'll see in some of the subgroup performance and how that played out. So this is just math, and that's the percentage of all students in the expected growth range. Then as we look at reading, again, some different numbers there. And the thing that stood out to Kelly and I as we were analyzing these numbers initially was that they were certainly much lower than the growth range in each class than they were for math. And so that was something that stood out to us overall. And so we certainly have some work to do there. As we looked at the achievement, what MAP does is that MAP gives us a percentage of students achieving average or above average, and their average range is the 41st percentile and above. And that is actually a little bit higher than the average range for most statistics. So the 41st percentile and above, and this is the percentage of students in each grade level who were testing at the 41st percentile and above in math. So pretty strong across the board, and a lot to be proud of there. And then as we looked at reading, pretty similar situation and pattern, and lots to be proud of their very, very strong performance across the board from students, when you have the percentage of students at about 3/4 of the students who are performing in the average or above average range pretty much across the board in the district, that is a lot to be proud of.
So that average number is average expected growth?
No. So this is the percentage of kids who were in the 41st percentile or above in each grade level. So there's a lot there. Then this is always an interesting statistic for you to look at. So the mean RIT score for District 65 students. So you can see right there in 7th grade, the average 7th grade student, so our average 8th grade student currently was at about the 90th percentile in math. So the average student in Lake Bluff is at the 88th percentile.
I may be the one that's pulling down the statistical analysis here on the board, that outlier. But again, these numbers and the percent above average, et cetera, seems to me to speak to sort of the fact that we've got maybe more gifted students, we've got a higher rate of maybe IQ, whatever, and that sort of speaks to the native person. Whereas the growth seems to me to speak to what the school is contributing, because it's growth. You started high, did you grow even higher? Did you start low and grow even, an expected amount for where you started from? That's why I'm surprised and continue to be surprised, despite all of your explanations, that our numbers on the growth aren't higher.
I would argue that it's actually a little bit of both. I don't think that you could start strong and end strong, and still be at the 88th percentile. I don't think that students can come from a strong background and have a poor curricular program or poor teaching and still continue to perform at the 88th percentile or even the 67th percentile as a comparison. And as a matter of fact, there's a great deal of research that suggests that that's really not possible.
What you're saying is if we had started at the 40th percentile instead of at the 80th or 90th, our growth would have been more dramatic.
Absolutely.
Without question.
So starting higher, you don't have much more room to grow. In reality, if you're at 95, you only have 5 points to
But
go.
why isn't that embedded in the expectation then of growth? I hear that point, I
Yes, right.
understand that, but then the expectation should be you're only going to go from 95 to 96, whereas you might go from 40 to 50, and that should be in the percentages. Maybe it's a flawed test on the growth, I don't know.
Did you do well in statistics?
I did not do well. This is common sense,
it's
not
like-
statistics, lies, analytics.
It's like baseball trying to maintain a 400 batting average for an
Yeah.
entire season.
Right.
It's really hard to do. You have nowhere to
Right.
go but down.
Yeah. It is exceptionally hard
That's how I think about it.
so if you are starting at the 99th percentile,
Yeah.
let's just say that. If you're starting at the 99th percentile in 7th grade, your score is going to be about 295 on the math map, okay? Your projected growth is going to be about 1 point.
Right, right, so
If-
if.
Hang
if-
on.
okay.
But in 2nd grade, if you are starting out at the 99th percentile, your projected growth is still going to be about 10 points. It's way different because you are, you're starting out
get
actually
that.
at like
I-
a 175 and you have way more to go over time.
That's not the part I don't understand. What I don't understand is if the 99 percentile is not expected to grow, maybe even at all, because there's no place to go, then why wouldn't, it show 100% of expected growth because you didn't expect them to go any higher, because they were already high.
That is a fair question.
I knew I was onto something. Fair question. So, all right.
We're going to sign you up
Anyway,
for a program at Northwestern.
So moving on to the reading scores. So looking at the performance of District 65 students in reading, the national percentile comparisons, again, really strong across the board. This is also a conversation that we frequently have with our teachers because a student who, if your average is at I'll use the lowest benchmark here, the 60th percentile in 4th grade. If your average is at the 60th percentile and you are performing at the 41st percentile, which is the low end of average according to MAP, you're still going to look really discrepant. And you're still average. You're still considered average. So you're going to look like you're going to need a lot of intervention and support, but really, what you really need is good teaching. And so that is a conversation that we have often with our teachers because they say, wow, Kevin is falling behind and he is way behind his peers and he is struggling in class. And it looks like Kevin is struggling in class. But the reality is that Kevin is in the average range. He's doing well. He just needs good teaching. And so that is what we have to consistently remind our teachers of. Yes.
So interpreting data like this obviously requires a broad and deep understanding of the flaws in the methodology and potential flaws in the testing. Do you and your peers in the school still find MAP testing beneficial in the way we structure curriculum for students?
Yeah, there is not a better measure out there currently. And we have looked,
So it's a useful tool,
absolutely.
Very
despite
much.
potential flaws.
Yeah, absolutely. The other tools that are out there are not as robust in their reporting mechanisms as MAP is. And because of our long history with MAP, we have so much that our teachers have built sort of an understanding on that they're able to say, oh, that makes sense to us, that
Yep.
there's a really good
So
solid
we go into
understanding.
this with eyes wide open, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you have conversations with teachers who may have a cohort of students in a particular year that didn't grow much? So, I mean, how do you handle that?
That's a really good question. We have really tough conversations with teachers because there are teachers who, it happens every year. So ECRA, who manages our data for us, provides us with growth reports on how our students do across the board. And what they do for their growth measures is that they actually take the last 6 assessments for each student and they project out where the student should be, and they compare that individually, and then they are able to map that up for each student, and then for each classroom, and then for each school, and then for each district. And so we do have very tough conversations with teachers about the fact that your growth was in the yellow or your growth was in the red, and let's talk about that, and let's review the students. Those are the terms that ECRA gives to us. And let's talk about that, and let's review the students, and let's talk about the sort of coaching that we're going to provide this year to make sure that that improves over time, because that can't continue to happen, because look what it did to the entire building, look what it did to the district, and look how it's impacting everybody overall.
How transparent is that data on the administrative side and on the instructional side? I mean, who gets to see that information?
So it is, it's information that the administrators and the teachers work together on.
I think the other thing that we have the conversations about is we have teams of teachers that look at the interventions we provide. So for instance, when you're looking at the 4th grade data, we have to look at the interventions where we have. If they're not working, then we need to have different interventions. And so each child that maybe doesn't grow as much as we predict them to be, we need to know why. What kind of interventions can we give them that would actually make them grow their expected growth? So.
One of the other measures that's in the strategic plan here is the percentage of students achieving at the 90th percentile or above by grade level. And so I've broken that out. You can see that it rises over time as a student is in our district longer. We increase the percentage of students. And so this is something that we'll be tracking as a part of our strategic plan. You'll be able to see a history of that. And then the percentage of students, and this is the same thing for reading, the same statistic for reading, the percentage of students achieving 90th percentile or above in reading. And then as we were looking at subgroup performance, and this is something that as we were putting together the strategic plan, there was some feedback in there about our students with IEPs or students from a low-income background or English learners even going to be able to achieve at the 50th percentile. And so this is to say, yes, actually they can. And about 40% of our students with IEPs achieved at the 50th percentile or above in math, and about 40% of our students from low-income backgrounds did the same thing, and about a quarter of our English learners did. And then as we look at reading, those numbers shift around slightly. So next month, what we are going to be coming back to you with is information about how our students performed on the bulk of our state assessments. So everything related to PARC and the science assessment, because they actually just reported that information to us for this year. And it still will not have comparisons, and then we'll have information in November about how we compare to others and about our accountability ratings.
Anybody have any questions further? Thanks, Kevin.
All right,
Appreciate it.
thank you.
Lots of detail there. All right, and then item 8C, Dr. Sophie's going to do a presentation on teacher shortages in Illinois.
I'm actually going to stay here, so Shelley, if you could do the remote for me, once we get it up. I'm going to fill you in briefly on the teacher shortage, both nationally and within Illinois. Next slide. This is a slide I got with the most current data, subject shortages as of 17-18 in the national report. Before I go on, in board book, I put 3 different reports. One of them is Understanding Teacher Shortages, and I printed out the one for Illinois, so you'll want to look at that. One of them is the Illinois State Board of Ed and what they're going to do to eliminate teacher shortages. And the really interesting one, which was the last article in here, is the teacher pay penalty has hit a new high. And it's a study that was done in 2017 on teacher pay and what impact that's giving us. And all the data that I received are in these reports. If you'll notice, nationally, the top 5 subjects that are reporting shortages are math, special education, science, foreign language, Spanish is a big one, and then our English learners. So those are all shortage areas. Next slide. There was a radio broadcast that many of the articles were referring to that occurred in August of this year. And it started out, and I think philosophically it's one that we need to think about, is this morning millions of American students trooped into public schools from coast to coast to be taught by not enough teachers. In districts across the country, thousands of jobs are going unfilled. Within the state of Illinois, you need to know there are many districts in the in southern Illinois that over 50% of their teaching staff are not certified teachers, they're subs. In districts across the country, thousands of jobs are going unfilled. In too many cases, teachers hired leave after just a few years. What drives the shortage? What is it going to take to get more people to choose a career in education? These are some thoughts. Next slide. On this radio talk show, which I'm going to try to get a hold of, they had some national speakers on here. Linda Darling-Hammond is one that, as educators, we follow quite often. She is the CEO of the Learning Policy Institute, which actually publishes many of the great reports that we read. And probably most of you have heard of Randy Weingarten, who's the president of the American Federation of Teachers. Next slide. In Chalkbeat, they really talked about in many large school districts, hundreds of teaching positions were unfilled. And what they're doing in those positions is they're either putting someone that's not certified, or they're doing online teaching, virtual teaching, or they're eliminating the classes. So in many high schools, they have to really cut out subject areas that they cannot staff. Next slide. Linda Darling-Hammond in the Washington Post wrote an article, Where Have All the Teachers Gone? Talks about the teaching shortages. She wrote the report that's in your packet. This is really concerning. A report by the nonprofit found that teacher education, so all the university programs for teacher education, dropped from 691,000 to 451,000.
5 years.
Between 5 years. So nearly 8% of the teaching workforce is leaving every year, the majority before retirement age. Next slide. This is a slide, the top part cut off, but a survey at UCLA found that freshman interest in teaching as a career has steadily declined over the past decade. I know that the normal universities that have trained teachers, many of their programs have been cut in half or more, or been totally eliminated. And they talk a lot about surveys, of educators. Do you tell your own children to go into teaching? And the majority say no. Next slide. Recent review of the state teacher workforce reports found that in the most recent year reported, which was last year, 31 states with data reported at least 82,000 positions filled by underqualified teachers, in addition to at least 5,000 unfilled vacancies during the school year. This is per state. Assuming similar rates of shortage in the remaining states, the national total is about 110,000 individuals teaching without having met certification standards. That's pretty scary. This number really understates total shortages because some states have only partial survey data. Next slide. In Illinois, the regional offices of education send out a survey every year that we fill out. So this was the results of their data last year. Next slide. In Illinois, you'll notice the top responding region was number 1, which is our region, and they talked about the number of respondents. Next slide. So in Illinois, we have special ed, English language learners, psychologists, speech and language, math, early childhood, and science. I have already shared with you that speech and language teachers are actually bargaining their salaries away from the teacher contract now. They can do that in order to get hired. Reported this year, the following areas have a very weak pool: middle school math, middle school science, middle school ELA, special education, early childhood, both special ed and general ed, English learners, foreign language, especially Spanish, and social workers and psychs. And that was from Cook County. Next. Superintendents in 56% of the districts surveyed in Illinois believe that they have a minor problem with teacher shortages. When you combine those with those who believe they had a serious problem, 78% of all the superintendents in the state believe we have some degree of a teacher shortage. I will tell you, 65%, and I think that number has gone up, believe that they have received significantly fewer applicants than 5 years ago. That is Lake Bluff. We are a wonderful district. People love to come here, but our applicants have we have less than half of the applicants we had 5 years ago. They are very pronounced for bilingual and foreign language teachers, as well as recruitment of school psychologists. Next. Why are teachers leaving the profession? These are just some of the things that were talked about in the articles. Teacher programs are getting smaller and being eliminated. We talked about that. If you pick up a newspaper or read an online post, every day there's some kind of criticism about teachers. Parents, in some cases, helicopter parents, there was a new term for, I think it's
Lawnmower parents.
lawnmower parents, I just read about that. And many of those type of parents, lawnmower parents, take up a lot of teacher time. Amount of curriculum to learn, to be able to teach it, the work they have to bring home for both planning, grading, committee work that they're on. Students themselves, it is cited oftentimes that teachers are not only the teacher, they're the parent. They make sure the child has food. They make sure that the child is going home with a place to sleep. Many school districts, like Round Lake in our area, actually have their medical services within the school. Retirement incentives are going away. Pay is really variable. There's a good slide in here on pay. And now, on top of all those things, teachers have to be the first-line responders in school safety. Lots of concern about arming teachers with guns. Teachers don't want that. They went into teaching to teach kids. So teachers are not just teachers anymore. They're really doing a lot more. Next slide.
I have several relatives who are teachers, and I have friends who are teachers. And the one I hear all the time is the societal criticism. They can do all the other stuff. If they would get a pat on the back and get some appreciation, it would make a lot of that other stuff
It
go
would
away.
make, well, and this slide I thought was interesting. Educators never went into teaching expecting to get rich, but historically it supported a middle-class lifestyle. That's harder to achieve today thanks to years of eroding pay for teachers, according to a new study. Teachers now earn 11.1% less than comparable professionals, representing a record pay gap between educators and other college-educated workers, according to the study. And the shift really represents a big shift from the 1960s, when teachers enjoyed a pay advantage of about 15%. That pay advantage attracted talented workers to education, especially women who at the time didn't have as many career opportunities as they have today. As teacher pay is eroded, students are increasingly stumbling education for more lucrative fields. And so one of the authors on the report, which again is in your files, I don't think anyone expects that teachers need to be paid substantially above what other college grads earn, but when they are paid substantially less, it's harder to recruit teachers. Next slide. In Illinois, and we all know Illinois, they are discussing 7-point proposal to reduce the teacher shortage. Those include coordinating a statewide campaign to elevate the teaching profession and inspire young people. I'd be curious to see how they're gonna do that. The second thing was to incentivize and create opportunities for preschool to grade 12 and post-secondary institutions to work together to have streamlined pathways into teaching. Support partnerships between school districts and teacher prep programs. Develop innovative, results-based approaches to educator preparation. Develop and adopt a research-based bar for licensure. Promote teacher leadership and career pathways with differentiated responsibilities. And develop robust teacher mentorship and induction programs. Next slide.
Do you think legislating caps on teacher raises will do anything to incent teachers to enter the field?
No. I don't.
It'll what?
You know how they're talking about, I think you're talking about the
The
mandatory.
3%, the
Oh,
cap.
the 3%. I'm thinking too, the minimum, a lot of districts down south, when they talked about mandatory minimum of 40,000 for teachers entrance, many districts down south could not afford that.
Well, they're doing both, like they talked about legislating a minimum, but then at
Right.
the same time, they talk about
Putting a maximum.
that's already passed, right?
Right.
That 3% cap.
3% caps will impact a lot of things we do, and you're going to be getting a lot of reading on that. Why are we going to be concerned, and why should we? Well, I have to tell you, certain children and youth are more likely to be affected than others. You saw in there, one of the biggest shortages is special education teachers. That is an area that we cannot afford to have teachers that aren't properly certified. Remote, rural, and urban areas have the worst teacher shortages of all. Students served in special schools are more likely to have less prepared teachers. Next page.
And then this is all at the same time as the state and federal governments mandate more and more and more out of you guys
Yes.
every single day.
Yep.
So if you can't get the special ed teachers or whoever, how do you fulfill all those requirements? I mean, it's
Good question.
very difficult.
Diverse staff shortages are the most dramatic. It is really important that your teaching staff mirrors what your student population is. And when it doesn't, some of our different groups don't have particular role models that look like them. And that, believe it or not, research has shown that that could impact their achievement. Next slide. Without certified teachers and early intervention providers, we may employ strategies that really exacerbate the problem. You know, we start early intervention before kids are even 3. There's agencies, then they come to us. If we don't have properly qualified teachers, we could create even bigger problems for us, the entire school system. Next slide. Not a real upbeat presentation. I will tell you, many of the articles I was reading also were talking about the administrator shortage is very close behind, because those programs are being cut in all the universities also. So I think, you know, the moral of the story is, teachers are the meat of our system. They are the educators in our system. The one slide that talks about all the reasons why they're leaving, it's a lot. And so, you know, I think as a society, we have to look at what we do. The federal government, the state government, there's a lot going on. And so that completes my report. And if you have any questions.
Interesting. Anybody?
Can I just make a kind of off-the-wall comment? In higher education, we would die to have the types of statistics that Kevin has about achievement and accountability and be able to evaluate teachers in that way. I mean, that's really one of the things that makes reform in higher education difficult. It's because we don't have those standardizations. I think K through 12, I mean, I think is ripe for disruption in terms of compensation. Mm-hmm. And a school district like Lake Bluff should be able to pay well for proven commodities. Mm-hmm. And I just, at what point does a teacher who consistently performs well in the statistical areas that you're all collecting have that data to be able to show and can say, look, I'm a proven commodity, and negotiates on their own for their compensation, rather than what we're going to be going into this year and managing them as a group.
That
So-
all has to deal with unions.
I understand that, but at some point, this is gonna happen. And a school district like us that can actually pay for the top performers, like, I would think the disruption should begin at a district, I'm not saying that we're gonna do it, but a district like us is where this should happen, because we should get the best and brightest from everywhere and be willing to pay it, but we need the information, we need the teachers that have their statistics and that have been pretty much a proven commodity over a period of time, to take the lead in that, realizing that the benefits for them are going to be really great if they're willing to kind of buck the traditional system. That's my
It gets even more
lecture
complicated
for
than
them.
that. I'm just, myself as an example, I started out as a teacher. Had a degree in physics, and within 2 years got a job offer that doubled what I was making teaching. I had a family of 2, I didn't really have a choice. So I think if we're going to attract math and science teachers especially, and you lined up foreign language teachers, special ed teachers, those kinds, I don't disagree with you. The problem is we run into the, tax base and how teachers are funded. It becomes a conflict. Property taxes, they're very high in Lake Bluff, as you know. So there's sort of a conflict there about the necessity, as I just described earlier, with respect to rewarding teachers appropriately, and how do you afford it as a community? I don't know how you solve that problem. I thought when I came on this board, I could help move in that direction, and I've been frustrated personally that I've been unable to do that. I don't have any answers on how that gets solved.
I guess it's frustrating to me. It's probably the same thing that, I'm sure we have teachers in this district that don't have a track record, that have been average. And it's tough as a school board to not have access to that information of who those people are, because we're kind of beholden to the current system of considering them as a class of individuals. But anyway, enough for my,
That's the union.
I understand.
All right, tough questions. Okay, so we're gonna move on to action. All right, our first item has to do with the 2018-2019 final budget. Just as a little background, some of what goes into the school district budget is determined by the Board of Ed based on advice from its professional staff and local citizens. More and more budget decisions, however, are forced on the board by factors beyond its control. Each year, the administrative staff gathers information from a variety of sources and presents the school board with a proposed budget. After carefully reviewing the budget, the board gives tentative approval and puts it at the file, on file for public inspection. The board gives final approval of the budget only after public hearing. The timeline for developing a tentative budget to the adoption varies from district to district, but the budget must be adopted by September 30th, after which time it must be filed with the county clerk within 30 days. I think one of the key things there is there's a lot of our budget that is out of our control. Any questions or comments about the budget before we move to approve it? So may I have a motion to approve the 2018-2019 final budget as presented by the administration?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
John Morozin.
Yes.
Leanne Charlo.
Yes.
Julie Godshall, yes. Richard Haig.
Yes.
Philip Hood.
Yes.
Susan Ryder.
Yes.
Mark Berry.
Yes, motion is approved, and just remember, everybody has to sign the budget after the meeting, so don't go running. Second item is the 2018 Employment Information System Report. This is a obligation that we have to fulfill every year. Gina,
Yes.
I'll let you give a little synopsis of that.
Actually, what it is, it's a mandate, but it's a good mandate. It's a transparent report of what everyone in the district makes, both certified and non-certified.
Any questions or comments? So may I have a motion to approve the 2018 Employment Information System Report as presented?
So moved.
Roll call,
Who seconded? I'll second. Okay.
we got it? Roll call vote, please.
Leanne Charlo.
Yes.
Julie Godshall, yes. Richard Haig.
Yes.
Philip Hood.
Yes.
Susan Ryder.
Yes.
Mark Berry.
Yes.
John Morozin.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Item C, the independent contractor agreement for Mike Elhern. Jean, can you give us a
Yes.
two-second update on what that's all about?
As you know, we have hired Mike, this is the third or fourth year in a row. He helps us with our teacher evaluation because our loads are pretty high for evaluation. He's kept his rate the same for us all of his years. He has a set load that he has, in particular special educators, since he's a former special ed superintendent. And so we recommend hiring him back again as an independent contractor. The agreement was drawn up by Hodges several years ago, and it's the same one we use every year.
Any further questions on that? So may I have a motion to approve the independent contractor agreement for Mike McElhern?
So moved.
Second?
Roll call vote, please.
Julie Gottschall, yes. Richard Haig?
Yes.
Philip Hood?
Yes.
Susan Ryder?
Yes.
Mark Barry?
Yes.
John Morrison?
Yes.
Leanne Charlo?
Yes.
And motion is approved. Item D has to do with board policy. The board approved first reads on all these policies on August 28th, and now this is the second read and adoption. These policies have to do with sections, school boarding, operational services, general personnel, instruction, students, and there's some additional ones. Does anybody on the policy committee have anything that they would like to highlight in those policies?
No.
Any other questions or comments?
My hat's off to the people on that.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, so thank you. Okay, so may I have a motion to approve board policy for second read and adoption?
So moved.
Second?
Roll call vote, please.
Richard Haig?
Yes.
Philip Hood?
Yes.
Susan Ryder?
Yes.
Mark Barry?
Yes.
John Morrison?
Yes.
Leanne Charlo?
Yes.
Julie Gottschall, yes.
The motion is approved. The personnel report, do I have the most current personnel
Yes.
report on here?
There's only
Only
one.
one, okay, so this month's personnel report is for a non-licensed new hire, a Dylan Martin, who's a teaching assistant at the elementary school. It's a new position that the board approved on August 28th. It is effective September 17th. Any questions or comments about this board, personnel report?
No.
May I have a motion to approve the personnel report for September 18th, 2018?
So moved. Second?
Roll call vote, please.
Do we need a roll call?
We're paying the guy.
Okay. Philip Hood?
Yes.
Susan Ryder?
Yes.
Mark Barry?
Yes.
John Morrison?
Yes.
Leanne Charlo?
Yes.
Julie Gottschall, yes. Richard Haig?
Yes.
Motion's approved. And our final item is our consent agenda. This month's consent agenda includes open session meeting minutes from August 28th, 2018, regular meeting, our closed session meeting minutes from the August 28th, regular meeting, our treasurer's report, our impress report, our bills report, and our P card report. Would anybody like any of those items pulled out of the consent agenda?
Nope.
Not hearing any, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda for September 18th, 2018?
So moved.
Second?
Roll call vote, please.
Susan Ryder?
Yes.
Mark Barry?
Yes.
John Morrison?
Yes.
Leanne Charlo?
Yes.
Julie Gottschall, yes. Richard Haig?
Yes.
Philip Hood?
Yep.
Motion is approved. Number 10, FOIA requests. There are several sort of insignificant FOIAs that were detailed in the board packet. If anybody wants to get into that, it's there. Public comment. Anybody like to address the board? Anybody on the board have anything left to say? So at 8:20, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.